You're stepping down, Claire. Effective immediately. Meredith Sloan didn't blink as she said it. Editor-in-chief of the Boston Ledger. Killer of bad headlines. Collector of clean exits. She nudged a manila folder across the glass table with 2 fingers like it might stain her blazer if she touched it too long. Inside, a drafted statement, 3 bullet points, and my name stamped like a bruise. Plagiarism allegations, the memo read. Out of respect for the institution, Claire Hollister has chosen to resign. Chosen. That word sat in my throat like a pebble. I didn't lift anything, I said. My voice came out level, the way it does when a bridge is already on fire behind you and there's no point screaming about it. The waterfront zoning piece is mine. Interviews, notes, raw audio. All mine. Meredith folded her hands. Optics, Claire. The paper can't weather this right now. You can fight it, but not from my newsroom. Behind her, the skylines spilled across the floor-to-ceiling windows. Ferries carving the harbor, cranes posing like metal herons. Boston was loud even when you couldn't hear it. The room smelled like lemon cleaner and old coffee. I'd spent a decade chasing messes so other people didn't have to smell them. Who filed it? I asked. The complaint. A reader. She didn't sell it. Meredith never did. Legal reviewed. We're protecting the brand. Our brand is facts, I said. If this is about facts, let me show you mine. Her jaw ticked just once. Sign the statement, Claire. Silence did what silence does. Pressed into my ears until I heard my own pulse. The folder waited. My byline, my pay stub, my health insurance. My name itself. Balanced on a sentence I hadn't written. I closed the folder. No. A muscle went off in the corner like a camera shutter. Not Meredith. The managing editor, Tyler, pretending to read emails. HR hovered by the door with a soft, practiced smile that said this wasn't personal, even though it was carved out of my skin. Then we'll proceed without your statement, Meredith said. Security will escort you to pack. There are moments you remember with taste. This one. Copper. I gathered my bag, left the folder, and walked out past a bullpen suddenly allergic to eye contact. Someone coughed. Someone else stopped typing, started again. On the far wall, my last front page hung in a brushed aluminum frame. A crooked city councilman in cuffs. My headline. My work. My proof that I wasn't a thief. The elevator doors slid shut on the 20th floor hum, and Boston's air met me like a slap. Salt, diesel, cold. I cut down an alley to avoid the reporters camping the front steps. My phone vibrated in a steady, cruel rhythm. Mentions. DMs. A text from my mother that read only. Call me when you can, honey. Another from an unknown number. Tough week. Happens to the best. Cute. At home, my apartment felt both too small and too exposed. Exposed because the walls held my life. Notebooks stacked like bricks, hard drives labeled with painter's tape. A corkboard pebbled with pushpins and string no one but me could read. Too small because shame enlarges everything. The echo of your steps, the sound of your breath, the word plagiarist buzzing like a gnat you can't swat. I poured coffee I didn't want and opened my laptop. The Ledger's push alert hit first. Veteran reporter resigns amid allegations. It was clean. Surgical. Meredith style. The comments were not. People love a fall. It makes gravity feel fair. I opened a different folder. One no one at the Ledger could access. A private archive synced to nothing. Interview audio. Screenshots. Metadata. Draft history logs with timestamps down to the second. Receipts, literal and metaphorical. Because I learned early that the only way to keep your name is to keep your proof. The anonymous complaint that triggered all this had landed 2 weeks ago. An email to the Ledger's tip line claiming my waterfront zoning article mirrored a piece posted on a niche policy blog. It didn't. Not remotely. But when I mapped traffic, the blog's post had gone up after mine. Its author used a pseudonym and a throwaway domain hosted out of Nevada. The IP behind the upload? Routed through a VPN that masked an origin in Cambridge. Same neighborhood as one person who'd benefit from my exit. Cassidy Rowe. The Ledger's sometime golden boy, full of charm and shortcuts, recently moved to a rival outlet with a check from a developer-funded urban innovation think tank. He and I had tangled before. His story's always somehow lighter on paperwork, heavier on access. Coincidence? Maybe. But coincidence doesn't buy burner domains. My phone buzzed again. A voicemail from an old source in City Hall. Whatever's happening, be careful. You poked something that bites. I pinned that to the board without listening twice. Then I did what I always do when someone tries to rename me. I started building the file. The kind that doesn't just explain a story, it detonates one. Timeline. Crossrefs. Who saw drafts when? Server logs. And because I'm done playing defense, a parallel track. The money behind the waterfront zoning changes. The developers who wanted it fast. The senator whose office shepherded it quiet. The nonprofit that kept buying ad space at the Ledger at a discount that looked in the right light like a favor. If they'd come for me with a lie, they'd have to wade back through the truth. I closed the curtains, turned off notifications, and began. I wasn't resigning. I was loading. Boston in February has a way of keeping people indoors, but scandal has the opposite effect. It drags them out into the cold just to get a better look. 2 days after the Ledger announcement, I stopped going to the corner cafe. People stared too long or not at all, both worse than normal. I switched to making coffee at home, burnt, bitter but mine. My world shrank to my apartment, my inbox, and the quiet tick of my wall clock. Outside, the city kept moving. Trolleys screeching over rails, delivery bikes slicing through slush. Inside, my email filled with subject lines like "regret to hear this," "you'll bounce back," and "quick question about your sources." Half were from people who wanted gossip without looking like they wanted gossip. The other half were from recruiters who didn't mind the stink of scandal if it came with my Rolodex. I answered none of them. Instead, I combed through the raw files of my waterfront story. I traced every interview back to the date and time, cross-matching each one with the draft edits I'd made. Each fact had a fingerprint and I had the whole hand. Cassidy Rowe's name kept creeping into my notes like a watermark. I remembered the last time we'd shared a byline. A quick-turn piece on a zoning loophole he swore was airtight. It wasn't. The Ledger had to issue a correction 3 days later, and Cassidy's grin never wavered. He thrived on getting away with it. My search history was a graveyard of shell corporations. One in particular caught my attention: Bayfront Civic Alliance. On paper, it was a non-profit dedicated to community enrichment. In reality, it was a pass-through: money in from developers, money out to media partners, and urban renewal consultants. A neat little laundering cycle with just enough public benefit language to keep watchdogs sleepy. Buried in an archived budget spreadsheet, I found the Ledger's name, $85,000 in promotional partnerships, over the past fiscal year. And in the same quarter, Cassidy's sudden move to Harbor Weekly, a glossy, developer-friendly publication with more ad space than reporting. It wasn't proof, not yet. But it was a path. And paths have destinations. At night, when the city lights flared through my blinds, I wondered if this was how it would be from now on. Working in shadows, chasing people who'd already written my obituary in the press. One evening, a knock rattled my door. I froze. No one knocks here without warning. Through the peephole, a man in a pea coat, salt and pepper hair, holding 2 paper cups. When I didn't move, he lifted one cup like a peace flag. "Claire Hollister?" he asked when I cracked the door. "Name's Ethan Parr. I used to be on the Ledger's Metro desk before Meredith came in. I think you've been set up. And I think I can prove it." It was the first time in days I'd heard my own name without a sneer. I let him in. Ethan set the cups on my kitchen table, the steam curling up between us. "Half CF," he said, sliding one toward me. "You always drank it when the rest of us were guzzling sludge at 2 a.m. I didn't remember telling him that, but he was right. It made me uneasy, how easily the past could walk back into the room. "What do you mean, set up?" I asked. He leaned back in the chair, scanning my apartment like it was part of the story. 2 months ago, I was freelancing for North Coast Monitor. I heard chatter about a smear campaign. Someone was paying to sideline a reporter who was making the wrong people nervous. Didn't know the name then. Now I do. "Cassidy." Ethan nodded once. "But he's just a middleman. There's a bigger engine behind this." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a slim USB drive. "These are email chains between Bayfront Civic Alliance board members. One thread is about neutralizing a zoning investigation, yours. Another outlines the complaint sent to the Ledger, word for word the same as Meredith's termination memo." I stared at the drive. If what he said was true, it meant Bayfront wasn't just greasing developers. It was actively shaping the press to keep its hands clean. Why bring this to me? I asked. Why not publish it yourself? Because I'm not the one they burned in public, Ethan said. This is your story, Claire. And if you drop it the right way, it's also your name back. There was the dangling bait. Reputation rehab in exchange for stepping back into a fight I hadn't chosen. I should have been skeptical. I was skeptical. But the part of me that used to chase leads across 3 time zones was already reaching for the hook. I took the drive. If this is real, Ethan, you just walked me into the deep end. He smiled without humor. Then you'd better start swimming. After he left, I plugged the drive into my offline laptop. The emails were rough scans, probably printed to avoid a digital trail. I paged through them slowly, recognizing names, state-level aides, consultants, lobbyists. And buried in the CC field of more than one chain was Cassidy Rowe's private address. There was enough here to light a match. But matches are dangerous in the wrong wind. I shut the laptop, sat in the dark, and tried to remember what it felt like to break a story without wondering who was waiting in the shadows when it hit the front page. Tomorrow, I told myself. Tomorrow I'd decide whether to go back into the fire. Tomorrow came with the sound of my phone vibrating against the nightstand. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, but the transcription flashed across my screen. Claire, this is Officer Rand with Boston PD. We'd like to ask you a few questions about an incident involving Ethan Parr. I was fully awake before the message ended. 2 calls later, I learned Ethan had been found in his car outside Quincy. No signs of a struggle, no wallet, no phone. The official line was possible medical episode, but no one could tell me why his apartment had been tossed or why the USB drive source files were missing from his desk. My stomach knotted. If this was coincidence, it had perfect timing. I pulled out my offline laptop, copied every file from the drive onto 2 separate encrypted thumbsticks, and locked them in different places. One in my fireproof safe, the other taped beneath the drawer of my desk. If someone wanted to make those emails disappear, they'd have to burn my building down. By mid-morning, I was at the public library, logged into a terminal under a fake email. I uploaded a single innocuous file from the batch, an internal Bayfront memo outlining a strategic media partnership with Harbor Weekly, Cassidy's new home. No names, no big fireworks, just enough smoke to hint at the fire. I sent it to an independent urban affairs blog with a tip. More where this came from. That night, the blog posted the memo alongside a short piece questioning Harbor Weekly's cozy relationship with developers. The comments lit up with speculation, and by morning, a local radio station had picked it up. Cassidy responded on Twitter with mock outrage. Another day, another conspiracy theory from the peanut gallery. His followers cheered. But I noticed something else. Harbor Weekly's site went offline for maintenance, less than an hour after the post went live. The first strike wasn't about blowing the lid off. It was about rattling cages, forcing the other side to show where they were hiding their teeth. And they did. A lot faster than I'd expected. That evening, as I walked back from the bodega, a black SUV idled at the curb across from my building. Engine running. No plates on the front. When I stopped, it pulled away slow, like a shark deciding it wasn't hungry. I stood there with the paper bag in my arms, cold seeping into my boots, and knew one thing for sure. Whatever had happened to Ethan, I was now next on their list. The SUV didn't return that night, but its absence didn't feel like relief. It felt like a promise. By morning, the blog that had posted the Bayfront memo was offline, its last article replaced with a curt message. Content temporarily removed pending legal review. Lawyers then. The oldest form of censorship. I spent the day in my apartment with the curtains drawn, sifting through Ethan's files again. This time I read them not just as evidence but as a map. Who spoke to whom, who signed what, and most importantly, who never put anything in writing. The absences told their own story. Around 3 p.m., my phone buzzed with an encrypted message from a number I didn't recognize. Check the Ledger's afternoon update. I opened the site. There, buried in the Metro section, was a short piece by Cassidy Rowe. Sources question legitimacy of leaked Bayfront memo. He didn't mention my name, but the subtext was a flashing neon sign. Unstable disgraced reporter peddles fake documents. The article quoted a former colleague describing me as obsessive and willing to bend facts to fit a narrative. The humiliation was meant to sting. It did. But it also told me Cassidy was nervous enough to go on offense. I called an old contact at the state auditor's office, A woman named Lillian Cho who'd once trusted me with a leak about mismanaged pension funds. We hadn't spoken in years, but she picked up on the second ring. "You're sitting on something, Claire," she said, no greeting. "Something that might interest your office," I replied. "Bayfront Civic Alliance. Their filings don't match their spending." "Bring me what you have," Lillian said. "But not over email. And not here." We agreed to meet at a diner in Revere, neutral ground noisy enough to drown out a recorder. That night I tucked one of the encrypted thumbsticks into my coat pocket and rode the blue line out of the city. The diner smelled like fryer oil and burnt coffee. Lillian was in a corner booth, a legal pad in front of her, her coat still on. I slid into the seat. "This is just a fraction," I said, pushing the drive across the table. "Enough to prove Bayfront is moving developer money into media to influence coverage." She didn't touch the drive right away. "If this is as bad as you say, you're going to have company you don't want. The kind that doesn't care about your side of the story." I gave a short laugh. "They've already been by." Lillian pocketed the drive. "Then I'll make sure they visit me next." When I left the diner, snow was starting to fall. Across the street, a man in a dark parka stood under a street lamp, his face shadowed by the hood. He didn't move when I walked past. But when I glanced back from the corner, he was gone. 3 days passed without a word from Lillian. No calls, no emails, no cryptic envelopes slid under my door. Instead, the noise came from elsewhere. A headline in the Boston Globe. "State Auditor's Office launches inquiry into Bayfront Civic Alliance." There was. Quiet Lillian had pulled the trigger, and now the story had legs. The article didn't mention me, but it didn't have to. Anyone close enough to the fire could smell who'd been carrying matches. That morning I took my coffee onto the fire escape and watched the street. No SUV. No hooded figures. Just the thawing crust of snow clinging to the gutters. And for the first time since Meredith slid that folder across her desk, I felt the balance shift. Not completely, but enough to hear the hinge creak. By noon, my inbox lit up with subject lines from unfamiliar senders. "Interested in speaking confidentially, we should talk," saw the Globe piece. Some were genuine tips. People with Bayfront horror stories, ex-employees who'd signed NDAs they suddenly didn't care about. Others were fishing expeditions disguised as concern. One stood out: "Private lunch? My treat. Harbor Club, 1 p.m. No name, just a phone number." I ignored it. An hour later, the same number called. Against my better judgment, I picked up. "Claire Hollister," a man's voice said smoothly. "Let's not waste each other's time. My clients don't appreciate the attention you're bringing to Bayfront. But they're prepared to make this worth your while, to shift your focus." There was the buyout offer. The polite bribe. "Not interested," I said. "You haven't heard the number." "I don't need to. I already know the cost." Pause. Then lighter, almost amused. "You'll regret that, Claire." When the line went dead, I saved the number under noise and forwarded it to Lillian with one sentence. "They're nervous." That evening, I opened a bottle of whiskey I'd been saving since my first byline hit the ledger. I poured a glass, sat at my desk, and laid out every piece of evidence in a timeline. Dates, memos, payment records, Cassidy's emails. It was a skeleton now, but I could feel it growing muscle. For weeks, I'd been on the back foot, answering hits as they came. Now I was holding something they couldn't ignore, or erase without drawing more eyes. The next move wouldn't be theirs. It would be mine. The call came from a blocked number just after 9 the next morning. I almost let it ring out, but instinct won. "Ms. Hollister? This is Jonathan Kearns, managing editor at The Beacon." I knew the name. The Beacon was Boston's high-polish weekly, the kind that published long, expensive features with enough weight to move public opinion. Kearns was a gatekeeper of reputation. "I've been following your situation," he continued. "I think you've been treated unfairly. We'd like to offer you a senior investigative role here. Full editorial freedom, the kind of resources you had at the Ledger, maybe more." It was tempting. Too tempting. Which meant there had to be a hook. "Why now?" I asked. "Because your name's in the air again," Kearns said. "And frankly, because we believe your Bayfront reporting could fit perfectly into a larger piece we're working on." Larger piece. A profile on Boston's development boom. It would be an opportunity to rehabilitate your public image while also landing a blow where it matters. I didn't answer right away. On the surface, it was everything I'd wanted. Platform, credibility, an open door to finish what I'd started. But in the silence I heard it, while also landing a blow where it matters. Their target might not be my target. What's the Beacon's relationship with Bayfront? Asked finally. A beat too long before he replied, minimal. We've run a few sponsored sections for their community projects, but... And your publisher? Any ties to their donors? Not that I'm aware of, he said, but the confidence had drained from his tone. There was the strings. Take their offer and my investigation would be swallowed, edited, and possibly neutered before it ever saw print. My name might be cleaned but the story would belong to them. I'll think about it, I said, though I already knew my answer. When I hung up, I stared at the mess of papers and drives spread across my desk. Kearns had reminded me of something important. Institutions protect themselves first. If I wanted this story to survive, I'd have to carry it myself all the way to the end. And the end was closer than they thought. The end came into focus on a gray Thursday afternoon, the kind of day Boston wears like an old coat, heavy, damp, and familiar. I was at my desk, cross-checking payment schedules from Bayfront's internal ledgers against public grant disbursements, when the pattern locked into place. The same 3 subcontractors appeared in every major project over the last 2 years. Each one was registered to a different owner, but all 3 shared a mailing address, a P.O. box in Somerville. I dug deeper. 2 of the subcontractors didn't have active business licenses. The third had filed taxes showing 0 income for the same years Bayfront's records showed them being paid hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was money laundering, sloppy but hidden under enough layers of civic paperwork that no casual glance would catch it. That's when I got the text from Lillian. Need to see you. Tonight. We met at a different diner this time, one on the edge of Dorchester where the booths were cracked vinyl and the coffee came in mugs stained from decades of refills. She didn't bother with small talk. Claire, the inquiry's bigger than Bayfront now, she said, sliding a manila envelope across the table. We traced some of their funding back to a PAC connected to Senator Ashford. That PAC has been funneling money to multiple media outlets, including Harbor Weekly and, indirectly, The Ledger. I opened the envelope. Inside were photocopies of wire transfer records, donor disclosures, and one email chain that made my skin go cold. Cassidy Rowe forwarding a draft story to a Bayfront board member before it was published. The subject line read, "This should take the heat off you. This is enough to open a criminal investigation," Lillian said. "But you need to understand once this moves you'll be in the middle of it. No hiding." I looked at the papers, then at her. I've been in the middle since the day Meredith pushed that folder across her desk. She nodded. Then I'll set up a meeting with the state AG's office. When I stepped back into the night, the air was colder, sharper. Somewhere down the block, a car door slammed. I didn't look back. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't wondering whether I'd get my name back. I was wondering how many people I could take down with me. The meeting with the Attorney General's office happened in a windowless conference room that smelled faintly of paper and cold coffee. 2 prosecutors, 1 investigator, and a digital recorder sat across from me. Lillian was there too, her legal pad already half filled with notes. I laid it all out: Bayfront's payments, the shell subcontractors, the PAC money, Cassidy's leaked drafts. Each piece was a stone, and together they formed a wall too high for anyone to climb over without getting caught on the barbed wire at the top. When I finished, the lead prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Naomi Drake, leaned back in her chair. "This isn't just a state case anymore," she said. "There's federal money in these grants. We're bringing in the DOJ." It was what I'd hoped for and what I'd feared. Federal involvement meant bigger headlines but also a longer shadow. People would notice. People I'd already seen lurking outside my building. 2 weeks later it all broke at once. The Globe ran a front-page exposé naming Bayfront Civic Alliance, Senator Ashford, and Harbor Weekly in a coordinated scheme to manipulate zoning coverage in exchange for developer donations. My name was in the byline. Top billing, no asterisks. Cassidy Rowe issued a statement denying wrongdoing, but the photo they used showed him ducking into a parking garage, eyes down as if trying to outrun the page itself. Meredith Sloan had no comment. The Ledger's board announced an internal ethics review. By evening, my inbox was a storm. Congratulations from colleagues I hadn't heard from in years. Interview requests from networks that had once parroted the Ledger's version of my resignation. And in the middle of it, one short email from Ethan's sister. Thank you for not letting his work die with him. That night I stood on my fire escape. The city stretched out below in yellow grids and dark water. For the first time since this started, I wasn't just fighting to clear my name. I'd done it. But clearing it hadn't been the end. It was the beginning of something else. Something sharper, heavier. Because now they all knew I could win. And people who can win are the ones they try hardest to destroy.